I'd like to begin a series on the book of Leviticus. So far in our Bible series, we've taken a look at the book of Genesis and also the book of Exodus. The book of Leviticus is the third in the books of the Torah, or what we call in Greek, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Those special books which deal with the revelation to Moses and the beginnings of our Jewish brothers and sisters. I'd like to take a look at the beginning chapters of the book of Leviticus. These chapters are very intriguing. They have to do with the concept of sacrifice for the Jewish people and the importance of sacrifice in their lives. Chapter 1 talks about holocausts, the idea of those burnt offerings. And the idea is that a male without blemish would be offered for a holocaust, either bulls, cows, calves, and sheep, and lambs, goats and kids. And what the person would do is put the hand on the head of the animal to be offered. And the idea is that the blood would be splashed then on the altar. Birds could also be offered, turtle doves and pigeons, and the blood would be put on the sides of the altar. Chapter 2 talks more about the cereal offerings, so it goes from the animal offerings to the cereal offerings. Oil and frankincense would be poured over the cereal offerings, and there'd be a token offering could be offered also. And for a token offering, only part of that sacrifice would be offered, and the rest then very nicely went to Aaron and his sons, who were of the priestly caste. So the priesthood initially descended from Aaron. I'm going to see later on the tribe of Levi takes over the priesthood. When baked, if there was a baked offering, unleavened cakes would be used, and the fine flour would be then mixed with oil, and the offerings also would be seasoned with salt, and the salt was very important. It was a symbol of friendship. So the idea of this offering was you were going to be friends with God, so the salt would connote this intimate relationship of friendship. Oil and frankincense would be placed on fresh gifts, and they would also be offered to the Lord. Chapter 3 goes into a different type of offering. So we've had the Holocaust, the burnt offerings, we've had the cereal offerings, and the token offerings. Now we get into what they call the peace offerings. And the peace offerings were offered in the fulfillment of a vow. So vows were extremely important. The idea was giving your word. So there would be a banquet as part of the peace offering, and the offerer and the guests would consume the animal that was offered, kind of similar to our concept of communion, this idea of united together in terms of the offering. So a beautiful symbol of this meal together. The hand again would be put on the head, that sense of intimacy, so the hand would always go on the head. Neither a male or a female animal from the flock, and again without blemish. So the animal had to make sure there was no sores on the animals or any injury. The animal should be without blemish. And then blood would be sprinkled on the side of the altar by the priest. The blood, of course, never consumed as part of the sacrifice, since the blood was considered to be the life source. And the altar, the peace offering would be done on the altar of the Holocaust, which of course would be outside the meeting tent. So again, the separation in terms of the sacrifice, not actually in the meeting tent, but the altar of Holocaust would be outside of the meeting tent. And a lamb and a goat could be offered as well. And the fat portions were offered to the Lord, and they would not partake of certain fatty parts and the blood, so that that was reserved for the Lord, certain fatty parts. Other fatty parts could be consumed, so it was a question of which fatty parts of the animal you were dealing with. Chapter 4 then gets into the idea of sin, and it talks really about inadvertent sin, which we sin without really intending to sin. And so there would be forgiveness rituals that would be offered, and it gets into different categories of people who commit these sins. So, for example, a priest, if the priest had committed a sin, an inadvertent sin, a bullock would be offered. would be put on the altar of the Holocaust. Again, the hand would be on the head, and the blood would be put on the horns that were on top of the altar. And also the blood would be sprinkled towards the veil in the meeting tent 7 times. Again, the importance of this number 7. And the blood also put on the horns of the altar of incense. And the rest of the blood would be put at the base of the altar of the Holocaust. They would remove the fat and they would burn it. And they would take the bullock out and burn what is left at a clean place outside the camp. So any remainders, that would go outside the camp in a special place. If the community had sinned inadvertently, a young bull would be offered. If the princes had sinned, an unblemished male goat, but there would be no blood towards the sanctuary veil or the horns of the altar of incense. So that part of the ritual was eliminated. If it was an individual person who had sinned inadvertently, then an unblemished she-goat or unblemished female lamb. So you can see, depending on who the person was, whether it was the priest, the community, the individual, the princes, there would be different animals that would be offered as part of this forgiveness ritual. Again, these were inadvertent sins. Chapter 5 gets into what they call special cases. And special cases would be, like, for example, if you refused to give information about something you had witnessed, if you had touched something clean inadvertently, if you had uttered an oath rashly without really thinking about that oath, then you would offer a female animal from the flock. But if you couldn't afford a full offering of an animal, then you could offer 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons. Again, the blood would be sprinkled on the altar and the remainder at the base of the altar. Now, if you couldn't afford the animals and you couldn't afford the turtle doves and the pigeons, then you would offer 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, and you would take a handful that would be burned on the altar, and the remainder of that flour would go to the priest. Now, if you cheated on the sanctuary, say you had obligations to the sanctuary and you cheated, and you gave your offering, but it was inadvertent, you didn't really cheat deliberately, then you would offer an unblemished ram, 2 silver shekels in value, and you would restore the value of the offering plus 1/5 more. And this would again be in terms of supporting the sanctuary. If you were dishonest to your neighbor, say you stole something from your neighbor, then you would make full restitution plus 1/5 more, and you would offer an unblemished ram. So you can see with these rituals of offering, the idea was that you had done something that you shouldn't do, and maybe it was inadvertent, but you wanted to make up for it. So to make up for it, you had this ritual of offering. The beauty of these rituals and the beauty of these sacrifices was that sense of community that it created, and the sense that everyone was subject to the same ritual. So it created a sense of identity. And also it showed people's willingness to reform, their willingness to look at their lives, to look inside, to look at the interior, to look at the motivations, to reflect on that, and to try to start over again. So these beautiful rituals that we see outlined in the first 5 books of Leviticus really give a sense of identity to the people. And of course, who was the very first one who gave this sense of identity to the people, who called the people, who was, of course, Father Abraham. And as we know, Father Abraham had many friends. Many friends had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's all praise the Lord. Keep on praising the Lord, and God bless.